Okay, so let's start, Shakti. I don't know what about others. Some students they have asked for some excuses, it seems. So let it be. We will start. Okay. So hope that Greco-Roman period is, now familiar to you. Actually, don't worry, even if you can't follow something, because this is not at all an easy task. We will not get all the ideas within a lecture or within the first or second study or something like that. It takes so much of time, so much of effort. And for you, I told you, in the beginning itself, this is the best time that you can choose for such a course, because when you join for your PG program, you will definitely be having a good foundation. Okay, good foundation on which you can build and develop. So don't worry if you find it difficult to cope up with some of the ideas or something like that. Don't worry, don't get panicked or something like that, because it takes that much of time, especially you are a UG student. Even after my PG, it took a lot of time and effort for me to understand and organize all these things. Okay, so that is the thing. You can continuously watch these videos, you can continuously take notes, and you can Google, and sometimes you can ask, even if it is like on weekdays or something like that. If you are come up with some doubts or something like that, you can ask this. Okay, so it's like that. So Greco-Roman period we have already discussed, and now let us finish this Old English as well as Middle English period. And just like I have mentioned in the first class, being a literature student, it is necessary to know the basic details of Old English and Middle English period, and who were the important and prominent figures during that time, and which are the important works, something like that. Of course, the historical details also, but connecting to the competitive examinations or UGC net or something like that, it is not that important to that you cannot expect so much of questions from this side or something like that. So having a basic understanding of this period is very important, but you don't have to put so much of effort into this particular Middle English too. Okay, of course you have to know better, but Old English is a period which you can like go through like that. Okay, so let's start with Old English literature. First, I planned to give a historical background of this Old English literature too, but that is not that necessary, because it will make someone confused, because so much of kings, so much of people, so much of wars and confusions, all those things, and that is not that necessary too. So if you have some doubts regarding that, when you make some research on that, if you have some doubts on that, you can ask. Let's start with Old English literature. Let's give importance to the literary part, and let's see the Old English literature, language, and the main literary figures during that time, etc. So, of course, Old English language is different from modern English language. We know that, because if you go through the original works of Shakespeare and all, it is different from what we are studying as English language. And considering Shakespeare's English, Old English is even heavier. It has not much connection with the modern English that we are using now. The consonant clusters and so many different types of pronunciation, grammar, spelling, everything is different. Okay, so English actually developed from the dialects closely related to of the Germanic tribes, because I told you Anglo-Saxons were there, and English at the beginning was a combination of all these things. Celtic people were there, Anglo-Saxon peoples were there, and Jutes, and all these people came from different regions, and Roman invasion was there, so it is a mix. Okay, so English is, of course, like this Anglo-Saxons and Jutes, all these people were the inhabitants of that island during that time. Angles, 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 Saxons, 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 and Jutes, Jutes. These are the three major groups who were staying during that time. And English got derived from, actually English is a part of this Germanic tribe. Okay, it belongs to the Germanic family. When you study this history of English language, you know that there is an Indo-European family of languages, and in between again further divisions are there. So Germanic group is there, and English is again a division of this Germanic family, Indo-European family, Germanic family, English. It comes like that. And Old English actually has four major dialects. Dialects, of course, we know we will be having, though we speak Tamil now, there will be different dialects of Tamil in the different regions, different parts of Tamil Nadu. We can have different dialects. So likewise, England was a very vast island, and it had four major dialects. For English, there was four major dialects, and they were Northumbrian, Mercian, West Saxon, and Kentish. Okay, these were the four major dialects. Northumbrian, Northumbrian, Northumbrian is the first one. Mercian, Mercian, Mercian is the second one. West Saxon, and the Kentish, Kentish, Kentish. This Northumbrian and Mercian, they were found in the region of north of the Thames. You know Thames River, right? Thames River is there in England, near to London. So this Northumbrian and Mercian were the dialects which you can locate near to this Thames River. And it is collectively called Anglian. Okay, Anglian dialect, Northumbrian and Mercian. These two dialects can be collaboratively be identified as Anglian dialect. And then Kentish. Kentish was the dialect of the Jutes. I told you there were three groups of people, the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. Okay, so Angles, Anglians. Okay, for Angles, we can have this Anglian dialect. Anglian is a combination of Northumbrian and Mercian. And then comes this Kentish one. Okay, Kentish one means that was actually the dialect of this Jutes people, Jutes. Jutes. And then in the late Old English period, the West Saxon dialect became most important. West Saxon was the most popular dialect during that time. And the standard of written prose, when people were writing something, it was usually this West Saxon dialect was used. That was the most popular one. So there were four, Northumbrian and Mercian, together called Anglian. And then Kentish was also there. West Saxon was also there, and West Saxon was the most popular one among them. Okay. Nearly all the surviving Old English texts, whatever we have now, whatever the Old English texts are existing now, all those are written in this West Saxon dialect, not in Anglian or Kentish dialect, but in West Saxon dialect. Okay. Then coming to the pronunciation and spelling of Old English, especially this West Saxon dialect, pronunciation was like very long vowels. Now we are using vowels, but Old English pronunciation is having very long vowels, and that was of course different from what we are having now, and had consonant clusters. Okay, now we are no longer employ these consonant clusters. For example, they use consonant clusters like HR, HL, HN, W, all these things. I'll give you an example. Today we use the word Lord, right? L-O-R-D, Lord. Lord is the word that we usually use now. But the same word was written and pronounced in Old English as Halaford. That means HL, the combination HL, consonant cluster HL was used. Then F-O-R-D. Instead of O-R-D, it was used F-O-R-D. So HL. Instead of L, they used HL. Again, one A was there because I told you long vowels were used. So in between, they incorporated the letter A, HLA. Then instead of OD, O-R-D, they used F-O-R-D. Okay, so Laford was the word they used, and the pronunciation is also not like this. It also has differences. Okay, so likewise they used. So this long vowels, consonant clusters, all those were the main characteristic features of the spelling and pronunciation of Old English. But now we are no longer using it. Then vocabulary, purely Germanic words. I told you English is English belongs to this Germanic family. So mostly German words were used in the vocabulary. And but you can see like the absence of French and Latin words in modern English. You can see so many derivations from French and Latin words. Most of the words, when you search for the etymological root, what is exactly the root of this word, then you can see like French or Latin origin. But in Old English period, there was no French or Latin connection, but all these words were like what to say, Germanic in nature. Okay. Then grammar, connecting to considering the grammar, Old English is a synthetic inflectional language. It is known as synthetic inflectional language. And now modern English is an analytical language. Let me explain the difference. Synthetic inflectional language means words themselves change to indicate a person, number, tense, or something with a word is there, and the same word can indicate a person, same word can indicate a number. Okay, words itself, like now we are using other words combinations or phrases or something like that, or we have different names or something like that. Modern English is analytical because more than changes within the word, changes of word order and use of prepositions, auxiliary verbs, all these are employed. Okay, now you got the difference, I guess, because earlier it was just the word, and words themselves change into indicating a person, a number, a tense, or something like that. But now we have order. If we take a word like apple, okay, it indicates something. Okay, there is a signifying thing for that. Apple is a fruit, and if you want to say I ate an apple, we use some verbs, some auxiliary verbs, and the word order, the verb is there, the object is there, so many things are there. So likewise we communicate things. Now earlier, even though you want to communicate like I ate apple itself communicate the same thing. Okay, that is the difference. Likewise it goes, and so that is why it is called, earlier it was a synthetic inflectional language, and now it is an analytical language. Then let's see the Old English literature. This is what all about the language, Old English language. Now, Old English literature starts from the period from 7th century to the Battle of Hastings, or the Norman Conquest, which happened in 1066. Hope you remember the first class. I told you William the Conqueror, the Norman king, he came and he fought with all the people here, the Anglo-Saxons and all the people here, and they conquered the island. Norman king, William the Conqueror. Okay, William the Conqueror, the Norman king. And that is what called Norman Conquest. So from Norman Conquest, it is known as the Middle Ages. Okay, not the Old Age. Old English period ends with the Norman Conquest, and there starts the Middle English period, or the Middle Ages. Okay, so before that, from the 7th century to this 1066, that is Norman context, people chanted. There was a musical instrument called harp, H-A-R-P, harp. If you Google, you will get the images of a harp. Okay, so with the accompanying of this harp, people used to sing songs. They compose songs and they sing songs. It is not something like already established songs or something like that, but they instantly make songs and they sing with the help of this harp. Okay, and the period was characterized by imposing scholarship of Christian monarchies. Okay, monasteries were there, and the major genres during that period were like epic poetry, then sermons, Bible translations, chronicles. All these were there during that. These were the major genres of Old English literature. And the great work of Old English literature is, of course, Beowulf. Okay, Beowulf spelling is Beowulf. Beowulf is known as the first English epic. Okay, the existing first English epic is Beowulf. And there were other major writers like Caedmon, Caedmon, Caedmon. And then Kinewolf. Actually, the pronunciation of Kinewolf is slightly different. Some people pronounce it like Cinewolf. Some people like Sign Wolf, and some people like Kinewolf. It is like that. It goes like that. Actually, we don't know what exactly the pronunciation is like that. It can either pronounced Kinewolf or Cinewolf. Okay, the spelling is Cynewulf. Wolf, Kinewolf. And then Venerable Bede, maybe sometimes you are familiar with Venerable Bede. So all these people were the major, figures, literary figures during this time. And this is something which you have to keep in your mind, like all these names: Caedmon, Kinewolf, and Venerable Bede. Venerable Bede, Venerable, Venerable Bede, Bede. Then some Old English manuscripts. We got some Old English manuscripts later, and from which only we understood that okay, these kinds of works were there during this Old English period, something like that. So there are like 4 major manuscript collections are available from Old English period. I'll give all these spellings in a slide later, okay, for sure, because the spellings are slightly complicated, and you can search also, just like he mentioned, you can search also like Old English manuscripts. If you search Old English manuscripts, you will get all these 4 names. First is like Junius manuscript, Junius, Junius manuscript. And the second one is like Exeter book, Exeter, Exeter book. And the third one is Vercelli book, Vericeli book, Vercelli book. And the fourth one is Novel Codex or the Beowulf manuscript. Why it is known as the Beowulf manuscript is like in this manuscript collection, we got the text of Beowulf. Okay, that is called Novel Codex, Nowell. Then Codex, Novel Codex. Actually, this is something, an important information. Sometimes I think in net or something, they have asked this question, like to which manuscript Beowulf belongs to. Likewise, okay, so that is Novel Codex, and this is the most popular one because of this Beowulf, and we have 4 major manuscripts during the Old English period: Junius, Exeter, Vercelli, and Novel Codex. And Old English poetry, when you consider, and in all these manuscripts, there are a number of poems. Okay, lots and lots of poems were included, and most of the authorships were anonymous. We don't know who exactly the authors of all these works are, including Beowulf. We don't know who is the author of Beowulf. Okay, that is anonymous. So in Old English poetry, generally, what are the features of Old English poetry? Very bold and strong, okay? Very bold and strong content. And mostly it is like elegiac or mournful. You know, I don't know whether you're familiar with elegies and the characteristics of elegies. Elegies will be like usually someone will be mourning or lamenting the death of other person or other people. Okay, that is what an elegy is called. And this is also, this Old English poems were elegiac in nature. That is like they were like very mournful in nature, mournful in the death of someone else or in the loss of someone else or something like that. Then signs of sorrows and ultimate futility of human life. What is the importance of human life, or what is the purpose of human life? Is it futile or something like that? These kinds of philosophical thoughts also incorporated in such works. Then there were like 2 types of poetry that we can see. One is like heroic Germanic, and second is Christian. Okay, religious type of Christian type of thing, and then heroic Germanic, which is like full of heroism, wars, or something like that. Okay, then it also portrays the helplessness of a man in front of the fate or in front of God or something like that. Then poems are mostly, I told you, anonymous. And then coming to Beowulf, Beowulf is something very important, and you should have a basic understanding of this work, Beowulf. Of course, this belongs to the Old English period, and we don't know who the author of Beowulf is. Beowulf belongs to the manuscript novel Codex, Nowell, Codex, Codex. And then this is actually known as England's oldest existing national epic. Okay, this is the first one that we found out so far. Then written probably in the 7th century AD. We cannot say exactly which year or something like that, but probably it must have been written in the 7th century AD. And then survives in a 10th century manuscript called this Novel Codex. Novel Codex is a 10th century manuscript. Okay, it is an old English manuscript, and it belongs to the 10th century. And someone through this oral literature, oral tradition, this Beowulf, the story and everything was conveying from generation to generation. And someone from the 10th century recorded it in this Novel Codex. And this manuscript badly damaged in a fire which happened in 1731. Okay, very later, 1731. Actually, we used to keep this kinds of manuscripts in museums or some places like that, but there was a fire in 1731 and this manuscript got badly burnt. But still we have the bits and pieces of this this manuscript. And you know what? Beowulf is such a lengthy, of course, this is an epic, and this is such a lengthy work which consists of 3,182 lines. This is also something very important because sometimes in competitive examinations, you will be asking with such a question like how many lines are there in Beowulf or something like that. 3,182 lines. Okay. And this is a Scandinavian story. This is a Scandinavian story of the Geatish king Beowulf. Beowulf is a king. Okay, Beowulf is a king, and he's a Geatish. Gate is the place to which he belonged to. Geatish, Geatish. Geats, Gates is the place, and Geatish, Geatish hero, Beowulf. Actually, the plot is like this, almost like he's a Geatish warrior. There are two parts. First part and second part are there for Beowulf. And in the first part, he's a warrior, a very heroic warrior. And he kills Grendel, Grendel. Grendel was a monster who attacks the country and the Danish king Hrothgar. Okay, the king was Hrothgar during that time. Hrothgar, Hrothgar. So he was the king during that time, and this Grendel was a monster, a sea monster, and this Grendel, attacked this country as well as the king and caused issues for all the people in the country. So Beowulf was the person who was assigned, entrusted to fight this Grendel, and Grendel was killed by Beowulf. So Grendel's mother was very angry, and Grendel's mother came seeking revenge, and the mother is also killed by Beowulf. Okay, that is the first part of the story. And the second part of the story or the epic is set 50 years later. Okay, 50 years later. Beowulf is now the king of Gates. Earlier, in the first part, he was a warrior, and after 50 years, you can see he is the king of Gates, and Beowulf kills a dragon who attacks his people. Still, though he is a king, still he is a very brave warrior, and he kills another dragon who attacks his people. But in that attack, he himself gets mortally wounded, and gradually he dies. Okay, that is the second part. And the Beowulf ends with Beowulf sorrowful burial. The people are mourning the death of Beowulf. I told you, no, like the Old English poetry is full of elegiac or mournful in nature. They'll be mourning for the death of someone. So Beowulf is also like that. Beowulf ends with someone mourning the death of this particular hero. And then the features of Beowulf are, like I told you, like a grandeur style is sustained from the beginning till the end. A grandeur style is sustained. Then it set the standards for heroism, how heroic a warrior is, and all those things. So they set the standards for all these heroism. And the transitory nature of worldly glories, however brave we are, whatever the achievements that we had, life is having a very transitory nature. All such philosophical thoughts are also explained in this particular work. And the fascinating representation of the court culture, court, the palace and the court, how the king and how the others, how the warriors are entrusted with this kind of encounters and all those things. All these are clearly mentioned. And digressions moving back and forth, some flashbacks are there, and then again comes to the reality. So likewise it goes. So all these are the major features of Beowulf. And Beowulf even today has great impact on the writers, like in the 20th century. It influenced many 20th century writers like W.H. Auden. W.H. Auden is very much influenced by Beowulf, and the references are there in some of his works. And then, Geoffrey Hill, another person, Thaddeus, the husband of Sylvia Plath, and the wonderful poet Thaddeus. And then Seamus Heaney. Seamus Heaney is also one of the important literary figures during the 20th century. Actually, Seamus Heaney's spelling is like Seamus, but it is pronounced as Seamus, Seamus, Heaney, Heaney. Okay. Seamus Heaney. Heaney translated this Beowulf. Okay, translated this Beowulf in 1999. He is, though it is translated into this modern English, he still uses so many archaic words and all those things. So that is what all about Beowulf and the four manuscripts. And then comes the other important figure, Caedmon. Caedmon. I mentioned his name in the beginning, Caedmon. Caedmon is a 7th century Northumbrian poet. Hope you remember the dialect Northumbrian, near to Thames. Okay. So he was a 7th century Northumbrian poet, and he is known as the father of Old English poetry. The father of Old English poetry, not the father of English poetry, father of Old English poetry. Okay, this kind of differences you should be very careful about when you attend some competitive exams or something like that. Then details of his life are actually known from Venerable Bede. I mentioned another person called Venerable Bede. Actually, Venerable Bede hasn't written any poems. He was a historian. Okay, he chronicled all these historical facts and details, and from his work, we understood something about Caedmon's life. Actually, the work of Venerable Bede is Ecclesiastical History of the English Race. I'll tell you that in detail. That was written in the year 1731, and in that there are mentions of this particular person, Caedmon, Caedmon. Actually, the story is very interesting. Caedmon was an illiterate fellow. He was a cowherd. Okay, those who goes with this cows and all those things. And all of a sudden, a miracle happened in his life. Actually, Caedmon was attending a feast. Okay, a public feast, and in that feast, everyone was asked to sing a song with the aid of this harp. I told you about the musical instrument, no? Harp. So with the help of this harp, everyone has to sing a song. But Caedmon, being an illiterate fellow, he doesn't know how to sing, how to compose and all those things. So he left the hall. He was very much ashamed and that he couldn't contribute a song, and he was very unhappy. Later, when he was sleeping, a man appeared in his dream and said, sing to me the beginning of all things. This is what the person in his dream said. Sing to me the beginning of all things. And Caedmon was then able to sing verses and words that had not heard before. Okay, he was like he doesn't know from where he is getting all these ideas and all these songs or something like that. That was a miraculous thing happened in his life, and all of a sudden he started singing different songs and all. Okay, so according to Bede, Caedmon founded the school of Christian poetry called Caedmonian School. Caedmonian School. The Christian school was founded by Caedmon. This is what Venerable Bede says in his ecclesiastical history. So, Caedmon's story is such an interesting story like that. Actually, his Caedmon's hymn, Hymn. Hymns are like this, religious, songs or something like that. And alliterative vernacular praise poems in 9 lines. His Caedmon's hymns are very popular. So that is the story of Caedmon. And we have another person, Cynewulf. I told you, Cynewulf, Cynewulf, whatever you can pronounce. He lived in the 9th century. Caedmon lived in the 7th century, and he is known as the father of Old English poetry. And here comes Cynewulf in the 9th century. And nothing is known that certain about his life. We don't know much about his life and all, and was probably very religious and believed to have lived in an old age, like till a very old age he lived, and he himself considered it as a burden. Oh, still I am alive, and in this old age itself I am alive. Likewise, he was not that happy. And he was certainly, of course, the evidences prove that he was a Latin scholar. Okay, Latin scholar. And in his poetry, the personal note is emphasized. A personal note. Everyone's poetry will be having certain features of their own, right? So in the case of Cynewulf, a personal tone was emphasized all the time, and it was kind of lyrical poems. And the major poems of his are Juliana, Juliana, the Fates of the Apostles. FATES, Fates of the Apostles. Don't worry, I'll post all these spellings. Okay, so you just have a connection with all these things. Now just write down like however it is okay for you, and then later I'll give from next week onwards. Probably I'll give the spellings. Then Elene, Elene. All these are his major works. Okay, and then he is also having some school. The school of Cynewulf is also there. Then comes some elegies. Okay, some common elegies, but we don't know who the author of all these elegies, whether it is written by a single person or whether it is written by a group of people, we don't know. But I told you about 4 manuscripts in the beginning, right? Like Junius, Exeter, Vericilli, and Novel Codex. These are the 4 ones. And the second book, Exeter, was having 7 elegies. Okay, in Exeter, we can see 7 elegies. They are, I'll just read out the names now. You can even Google it and find it out, and or next time I'll give you the PPT of this. Exeter book. In Exeter, EXETER, in Exeter book, there were 7 elegies. They were Dior, Wolf and Advisor, the wife's lament, the husband's message, the ruin, the wanderer, the seafarer. Okay, these are the 7 elegies that we can find in Exeter book. We don't know who is the author of all these works. Dior, Wolf and Advisor, the wife's lament, the husband's message, the ruin, the wanderer, the seafarer. All these are the different elegies. And then comes the English prose. So this is what all about the poetry. It will end in 1 minute, I guess, so that you can rejoin again. So sermons and translations from Latin, like two types of prose works were there, like one is Christian and other is secular. Christian means very religious types of sermons and prose works. And Alfred the Great, Aelfric, Wulfstan, all these people were the major figures who wrote like this. I told you these are not that very important, but you should have an understanding of this. And then secular, like Anglo-Saxon chronicles, then Alfric, or some riddles were there. All these are like secular works, not religious works. Okay. Then we have to discuss Venerable Bede. I think in the next slot we'll discuss him. And now it will be like ending soon. Venerable. Okay. So Venerable Bede is the person about whom we were talking. It's okay. Then he lived in the 7th and 8th century. Okay. We don't know exactly to which century he belongs to, but like almost like towards the end of the 7th century or in the beginning of the 8th century. And he wrote almost 40 books, okay, almost 40 books are to his credit, dealing with theology, history. I told you he was not a poet, but he was a kind of a historian, a writer who wrote so much of theology, history, and all those things, okay. And varied themes, including commentaries on Bible, observations on nature, music, poetry, all these were included in his work. That is ecclesiastical history of the English race. That is what his famous work is all about. And we got so much of information related to the Old English period and all those periods. We got all these informations from this particular book, that is Ecclesiastical History of the English Race, which was like we trace the root in AD 731. We don't know exactly, but still this is what we usually acknowledge, AD 731. And this work is originally in Latin. Okay, this particular work is originally written in Latin. Historia Ecclesiastica Genetis Algorithm. Sorry, not algorithm. Anglorum, sorry, Anglorum. That is what the Latin name of this particular work, but is popularly known as Ecclesiastical History of the English Race in English. And he has written this particular work in 5 books. Okay, 5 books are there. 5 parts or 5 books are there, and this is an authentic historical document. Okay, we got lots and lots of I told you know about Caedmon and all those stories. We got information from this book only. So this is considered an authentic historical document. And then comes King Alfred the Great. King Alfred the Great, though he was a king, he was a writer, he was a translator too. So he was the king of Wessex. He was the king of Wessex from AD 871 until his death, that is in AD 899. And then he successfully resisted so many Danish attacks. Hope you remember in the first class I told you the Vikings from Denmark, this Danish people, they made lots and lots of attacks on England and other places. So he was the king who fought against all these people. And he translated so many theological and philosophical prose from Latin. Okay, from Latin, he translated many works. Like some examples are like the Pastoral Rule by Pope Gregory, that was written in Latin, and he translated it into English. Then History of the World by Orosius. All these works are like, and then of course his Ecclesiastical History of English Race by Venerable Bede. That is also translated. I told you, the text was written in Latin. And then it is King Alfred the Great who translated it into English first. King Alfred the Great. Okay. So and then he initiated his work on the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is also a very important historical work. It is a collection of annals, a major historical documents, just like the ecclesiastical history of English race. This particular work, this Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, is also a very popular historical document. And another person of this time is Aelfric of Eynsham. Okay, Aelfric, A-E-L-F-R-I-C, Aelfric of Eynsham, E-Y-N-S-H-A-M. Eynsham is a place, and then late 10th century clergyman and a prose stylist. He's a clergyman, a religious person. And he also lived in the late 10th century. And he was a prose stylist, of course. Then he's well known for his sermons, homilies, saints' lives, and all those things. Of course, he is a clergyman, so we can expect what kind of a work he was writing. Okay, the lives of the saints, the Catholic homilies, all these were the major concerns or the major contents of his works. Then he used plain English, okay, plain English, and sustained the interest of readers and listeners, because if it is kind of archaic English or very difficult kind of terms or something like that, the people will lose their interest in reading it continuously. But this person retained or sustained their interest by using the simple form of English and wrote this kinds of things. And he even wrote letters to teach Christians their duties. Okay, what are your duties? How you have to live? How you have to, worship God? All these things, like in the form of letters. He started writing. Okay, and he wrote some textbooks to teach Latin also. Not Bede or Alfred. This is another person, Aelfric, A-E-L-F-R-I-C. We have completed Venerable Bede. We have completed King Alfred. Actually, Venerable Bede is ecclesiastical history of English race. He was a theoretician. Okay, he was not a religious person or someone like that. He was a historian and who wrote theology. But he wrote in Latin. Actually, King Alfred the Great was the person who translated so many works from Latin, including Venerable Bede's Ecclesiastical History of English Race. Okay, that is another person, King Alfred the Great. Right now, I am speaking about Aelfric of Eynsham. A-E-L-F-R-I-C, Aelfric. Okay, Aelfric of Eynsham. Aelfric of Eynsham was a religious person. Okay, he was a clergyman. So Venerable Bede was a historian. King Alfred the Great was a king as well as translator. Now, Aelfric the Ancient, these are the three major prose writers or historians during this time. So, Aelfric of Eynsham is the person about whom we are discussing now, and he is a 10th century clergyman. Okay, religious person, clergyman, and he is well known for his sermons on this lives of the saints, Catholic homilies and all these things. And he was the one who wrote letters to teach Christians how to live, how to worship the God and all those things. And also he wrote some textbooks to teach Latin, because during that time for people, Latin was an unknown language. But the major works are in Latin and all. So he helped the people to learn Latin, and so he created some textbooks. Okay. And he made translations from the Old and New Testaments, the Bible. Okay, he made some translations also. So he copied through, his works were copied throughout the Middle Ages, because those were very important. And the first Old English book to be printed is also by Aelfric of Eynsham. Okay, the first Middle English book, Old English book, which was printed, belongs to this person. He didn't print, later someone else printed, but that book belonged to this particular person. Okay, so Caedmon, Cynewulf were the two major poets during that time, and Beowulf was also there. Some elegies were also there. We don't know who were the authors of all those things. And then comes the prose writers. Prose writers are Venerable Bede, King Alfred the Great, and the third one is Aelfric of Ancient. Okay. Then there are also other writers, but they are not that popular, but their names are like Wulfstan, 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 just for your understanding, that is it. Okay, like he was a contemporary of this Aelfric, the clergyman. But his works are also not that, he too wrote some sermons, and something like that, but not that popular, but he existed during this time. So this is what all about Old English literature. Old English literature mainly consists of the major work happened during Old English period is Beowulf, for sure. And you should have a basic understanding of what kind of a language Old English was having. The West Saxon dialect was dominating. Though we had Northumbrian, Mercian, and Kentish dialect, West Saxon was the most dominating dialect during this time. And all these works can be seen in West Saxon dialect. And then we had, another writers like, okay, Beowulf was the work, and we had four manuscripts, this Junius, Exeter, Novel Codex, and Vericilli. Okay, these are the four manuscripts from which we got all these poems and everything. And then again, Beowulf is the popular epic, the first existing national epic of England, and it consists of 3,182 lines. And then this belongs to the particular manuscript Novel Codex. Okay, then again we have 7 elegies in the Exeter book, the second manuscript in the Exeter book. We have 7 elegies, but still we don't know who are the authors of these works. The Giaour, the Seafarer, the Lament of the Wife, something like that. No, the 7 things I told you. Yeah. So they all those 7 were the important elegies during this Old English period. And then comes the popular writers whom we could identify. They are Caedmon and Cynewulf. Caedmon was a cowherd, and he was such a, this kind of a person, illiterate person, and on a miraculous incident he got all these power to write poetry, and he started singing songs and all, and it goes like that. And we got this information from Venerable Bede's Ecclesiastical History of English Race. And then comes Cynewulf. Cynewulf was also like, he was in, and Caedmon is known as the father of Old English poetry. And Cynewulf, actually, he lived in the 9th century, and he too wrote some works or something like that, and they are the major poets, and rest of the poets we don't know, they are anonymous. And then comes to the prose works of Old English period. We have Venerable Bede with his popular Ecclesiastical History of English Race. And then comes King Alfred the Great. Okay, he actually translated many works from Latin. And of course, he started writing Anglo-Saxon chronicles. Anglo-Saxon chronicles chronicles is also into the credit of King Alfred the Great. And he was the one who translated Venerable Bede's Ecclesiastical History from Latin to English. And, Anglo-Saxon chronicles also in his credit. And then finally comes Aelfric of Ancient. He was a clergyman. Okay, he wrote so many sermons and all those things, and he wrote some textbooks for teaching Latin, and he wrote so many letters which explain how to be in a Christian, how to be in the Christianity, how to be a good Christian, what is the lifestyle and all those things. Okay, so this is what all about then Wulfstan is also there. He was also a minor writer during the time of Aelfric of Ancient, and he too wrote some sermons and all. Okay, so this is what all in a nutshell, this is what all about the Old English period. The important things that you should be familiar with. Other things and so many historical facts and all those things are there, and in course of time you can learn all those things, but these are the basics. And then comes the Middle English period. Let us just begin this Middle English period. I don't know we are able to finish this thing today, but still we'll try our level best. Okay, the medieval period extends from the Norman conquest. I told you, Old English period starts from the 7th century and ends with the Norman conquest, when the Norman king William the Conqueror came and conquered this particular place, England, and that is what called Norman conquest. And the year is very important, 1066. Please fix it in your mind, okay? 1066 is the year of Norman conquest, because it makes so much of change in the history of England. That's why. And there starts the medieval period. From Norman conquest, 1066, it starts the medieval period. Okay, actually medieval period can be like in majorly 2 phases, but we can generally say like 3 phases. First phase is like Old English period, early Middle Ages. Old English period is otherwise known as the early Middle Ages, and then comes the High Middle Ages. High Middle Ages means 11th century. That is, this 1066 is 11th century, right? So 11th century to 13th century, 11 to 13. This is known as this early Middle Ages. You can say like that, because the other one is Old English period, no? So this is called early Middle Ages. And then late Middle Ages starts from 14th century to 16th century. From 16th century onwards, there was like Renaissance and all those things. So Middle Ages ends with the 16th century. So early Middle Ages, 11th to 13th century. Old English period, 7th to 11th century, that is 1066 specifically. And early Middle Ages starts from 11th century to 13th century. Then late Middle Ages extends from 13th century to or 14th century to 16th century. It goes like that. Okay. And this time we can see the French influence in culture and society. I told you in Old English, there was no French or Latin influence. It was full of Germanic words. But here in Middle Ages, you can see the French influence are there, the Latin influence are there, mainly French influence, and feudalism was there during this time. Strict social hierarchy, and then 3 social classes were there. According to the feudalism, the whole society was divided into 3 hierarchical classes. The one is aristocracy, second one is episcopacy, and third one is peasantry. Okay, aristocracy, of course, just like the word mentions, it includes the king, the barons, and the knights. That means the king, the advisors, and the major people, just like the ministers and all those people, and then the soldiers, the main soldiers of that time. This is what called aristocracy. Okay, and then comes episcopacy. Episcopacy means the clergy, the religious people, the church, and everyone. Okay, in episcopacy also there was a division like high clergy and low clergy. High clergy, they were almost like the barons. In aristocracy, you can see the kings, barons, knights. Okay, this is like the aristocracy's division. Aristocracy, episcopacy, peasantry. These are the 3 major divisions. And in aristocracy, you can see the king is there, the barons are there, and then comes the knights. Knights. Knights mean the major soldiers. And then here in episcopacy, high clergy and lower clergy. High clergy almost shared the equal space of this barons who comes next to kings. Okay, so barons and high clergy were almost equal. And then under the high clergy, there was low clergy. They were like, they were helping this high clergy and all these people. Then peasantry. Peasantry is like full of common people, the people who work in the fields, in the agricultural fields and all those things. The common workers or the laymen, they were considered as, or they were identified as peasantry. Okay, aristocracy, I told you, the king, And the kings were ruled with the divine right theory. This theory is very important. Divine right. That means they are thinking like God has given us the power to rule. Okay. So it is not gained by my power or something like that. God has given this power to me. And that is why I am the ruler. So I am almost like I am a person chosen by the God. So I have some divine powers. Okay, divinity is there. So likewise, the kings believed during that time. So people also considered king to be like very divine figure or someone like that, because God will choose only that kind of people, right? So that's why. So the kings believed with this divine right theory, and then comes this barons. Barons were the king's direct subordinates. Soon after the king, who comes? That means barons. Okay, these barons were given with large portions of king's land, and they can make the people work in those lands, but they have to give a particular amount to the king. Okay, the profit amount to the king, and they governed the king's land, because king cannot govern all these things. So he'll be dividing different places and entrusting all these barons to take care of these places. So barons will be the ones who are taking care of all these places, then provided like troops, and they fought for the king. Even the barons, they fought for the king when it is necessary, and this is what they did. And then comes the chivalry. Okay, chivalry, or the knights in aristocracy: king, barons, and knights. Actually, knights constituted the lower nobility in the face of aristocracy. Like these people were at the lower strata, but still they are aristocrats, and they became identified with the ideals of chivalry during the Middle Ages. Actually, what is this chivalry? Chivalry means, chivalry, the spelling is Chivalry. Chivalry, Chivalry. Chivalry means this is the code of behavior that a knight should follow. Okay, for knights, a code of behavior is fixed. A knight should, because for soldiers, our military soldiers are having a code of conduct. They should act like this, they should go like that. So likewise, lots and lots of code of conduct, and still there for the military soldiers, right? So likewise, these people, the knights, were also given with so much of this kinds of code of conduct, and that is what called chivalry. Okay, chivalry means faith and deep love, or for this Christian religion, because episcopacy, the religion, Christianity was so dominant during that time. So the knights should be very religious. They should love the religion, and they should ready to die for the church. Okay, not for the kingdom, not only for the kingdom, but for the church. They should be ready to die for the church. And then generosity. The knights should have generosity. Then they should have the strength to protect the women and the weak ones. Weak one means the older ones, or who cannot protect oneself. So the knights should protect the women and the weak ones. Then they should fight against injustice and evil. Just like our soldiers also having these kinds of code of conduct even now. And then they should be courageous in the face of the enemy. They should not get intimidated with the advances of the enemy. They should be like very brave and very courageous on their face as well as in their work. And then like was special armor and clothing. They had different, just like our soldiers is having now, are having now. This people also had different kinds of costumes and armor and things like that. So they had to follow all those things. Okay, so it goes like, and this is what called chivalry. Okay, so the aristocrats, king, barons, knights, and the knights, they had to follow this chivalry. Chivalry is the code of conduct. Then comes the episcopacy. EPISCOPACY, aristocracy, episcopacy. Episcopacy means the clergy were divided. It's all about religion and church, and the clergy were divided into two: high clergy and the low clergy. I told you, high clergy, they were having almost the equal status of the barons. Okay, they were so predominant, they had so much of advantages. But the low clergy, who were almost like the peasants, there was no much difference between the local or normal peasants or this low clergy. Low clergy, they were assigned with the works of serving this clergyman, high clergyman. That's it. Only in the mode of work they had the difference. Otherwise, in the case of this nobility or in the case of their dignity, they were almost equal to the normal peasants. And the church leaders were there in episcopacy. They held power over the peasants. I told you this church was also very important. The knights were supposed to die for the church. So church had that much of a power on the common people. Okay. And then many bishops also governed the real manners, just like the barons. The bishops also sometimes did the same works of the baron. They were also very dominant like the barons, and they spoke and wrote in Latin. Okay, the clergy people, they spoke and wrote in Latin, not in English, because they were like, okay, we are high clergy. So Latin and French are considered to be the sophisticated language of that time. English was considered the language of the peasants. So they were following this Latin language. Then comes the peasantry. Okay, peasantry means the serfs or the peasants, normal people, local people. They lived in the bondage and they were treated mercilessly by the nobility and the high church. Nobility means the aristocracy. Aristocratic people as well as the clergymen, they both treated these peasants very mercilessly. They didn't even give them a human status. Okay, the peasants believed that their afterlife would be in heaven if they gave money to the church. I told you in the first class how during the medieval ages, the church, the high clergy was really corrupt, manipulated the peasants. Actually, they wrote and taught everything in Latin. So whatever they speak in Latin, the people will not understand. So they'll be like interpreting what is written in Bible, and they made so much of manipulations, they made so much of misinterpretations, and they convinced the people that you should not enjoy any luxuries in your life. Whatever you earn, you should give to the church. Okay, whatever you earn, you should give to the church, then only you will go to heaven. If you enjoy any kind of luxuries in your life, definitely you will go to hell. God doesn't like that. God likes only the clergy to enjoy with these kinds of things. You people are normal people like peasants. Okay, you are not the chosen people of the God, so you should not enjoy like this. Likewise, so many manipulations were made by the clergy, and they grabbed all the money from all these people. And I don't know whether you remember, I told in the first class, like during the Renaissance, during the after this fall of Constantinople and all these things, people started to question the church. Is it like that? Is it really like that? Has the God told like that? So likewise, they started questioning the clergy. And when this Protestants came, the Catholic, this is like Roman Catholic people, this clergymen are like Roman Catholic people. And when Protestants came and when they got replaced with Roman Catholicism, they almost dissolved all the Catholic monasteries, and they got lots and lots of money from all these monasteries, because these are the money they grabbed from all these people. Okay. That was the peasant's life. So the peasant's life was very, miserable one, because they were continuously working and they couldn't keep the money with them. So they struggled, they starved, and sometimes they starved to death. And they served the clergy unquestioningly. They should serve. The clergy are saying something and they should do that without any questions. And then the peasants lived in a life of squalor, superstition, and ignorance. They didn't know anything because they cannot read, they cannot write. The only information that they are getting is like all this misinterpretations by this clergyman, and they thought like, okay, this is what correct, because they don't have any other resources to access more and more ideas. So that is what actually happened. And then during this time, like the early Middle Ages, much of the Eastern Roman Empire, I told you, Western and Eastern Roman Empire were there. And the Western Roman Empire fell during the 5th century AD itself. And the Eastern Roman Empire was flourishing. That was the Byzantine Empire. And the fall of Constantinople is the fall of Byzantine Empire. I'm simply like revising in between just to make you understand that, because that is very important. No, so because of this Eastern Roman Empire, like some Islamic effects were also where Islams were also started to get popular during this Middle Ages. Okay, early Middle Ages. Christianity was dominating, of course, but still the traces of Islam can also be traced during this time. And then early Middle English period, which starts from 11th to 13th century, specifically 1066 to 13th century. Transformation of the English language happened. I told you how the earlier Old English language was, how the pronunciation, how the grammar, how the structure and everything was. I told you in a nutshell. So during this period, that is early Middle English period, 11th to 13th century, started like the transformation of the English language started. They simplified in spelling, grammar, because the influence of Norman French. Till then, I told you there was no French or Latin influence was there, but now the French influence is there, and people started to simplify the language. Then London became the administrative center. All this happened during this particular time. Okay, so you can trace it. Like London became the administrative center during this time. An aristocratic society and the taste for French literature. Okay, like the aristocratic society is like this, and French literature is like this. French influences were there during this period. Then a militaristic culture was also there. Militaristic culture means England became aggressive and confident and militaristic, and later determined the boundaries of a vast empire. Like England started to gain the power. Okay, we too have militaristic power like the soldiers like this. We can also like protect our boundaries. We should not allow anyone to enter or conquer ourselves. Okay, so likewise they started getting so much of confidence on that. Then again, England in the 14th century, again, that means this happened in the 11th to 13th century, that is early Middle Ages. Now in the late Middle Ages, population increased. Okay, in the late Middle Ages, population increased, leading to calamities like Black Death, and in the last of Middle Ages, there happened Black Death, because it is because of the population explosion. So many people were there, and because of that, Black Death is kind of plague. Okay, plague. And the disease plague was spreading all over the country, and it took the lives of many. Then economy prospered during this time, because they were developing step by step. They were developing, and economy also prospered during this time. Intellectual, spiritual, and artistic flowering in Christian monasteries. Okay, so many intellectual developments, because they were getting so many resources from French and Latin. This thing still, this Renaissance didn't happen. Still, the works, the classical works, are not yet spread over, but still, because of all this, like some flowering in the intellectual and spiritual thoughts were there. And the late Middle English period, that is from 14th to 16th century, it followed the high Middle Ages. Like what happened in the 14th century, it happened till the 16th century. Okay, but you can see like so much of issues happened to this period, that is like in the 14th 15th centuries. You can see, like, of course, great famine. I'll briefly explain what all these are. Great famine, Black Death, 100 years of war, peasants revolt, then fall of Constantinople, then invention of printing press by movable types. Move பண்ற முடிகிற types which like we could do this printing. And then Wars of Roses. I mentioned it in the first class, Wars of Roses, the awakening of Renaissance and Reformation. All these things happened during this. So these 2 centuries are very, it's filled with so much of happenings. Okay, so much of things occurred during this time. First of all, let me just, I don't know whether I can finish, but still, let me just explain what all these things are. First of all, the famine, the great famine, it happened in 1315 to 1317, the 3 years, 15, 16, 17, 13, 1, 3, 1, 5, 13, 15 to 1317. Actually, Europeans were farming almost all the land they could cultivate. The peasants were doing this agricultural this thing. And the population crisis developed. By then, population crisis was there. And then climate changes in Europe produced some problems. For these 3 years, there was continuous raining, heavy raining. And this affected the farming, this affected the harvest, this affected their productivity. And then also I told you, population was exploding during this time. So for everyone, there was not enough food. So as many as 15% of the peasants in some English village died out of starvation. Okay, so this is what the Great Famine of England. This happened in 1315 to 1317. Why these are very important? Because it influenced many of the works and many of the happenings after this particular occurrence. Then comes Black Death. Black Death, of course, plague, attack of this bubonic plague that ravaged Middle East and Europe completely, not only in England, but in Middle East, Europe, and everywhere. And it reached England in 1348. Just like COVID started in China and later came to India and in our places, it reached England in 1348. Okay, and of course, it reappeared several times. And death of 1/3 of English population. Can you just imagine? 1/3 of English population died out of this Black Death, that is plague. Then led to so many social chaos, labor shortages were there, and peasant revolt was a reaction of this Black Death. People got fed up. First it was famine, and now it is like Black Death. The peasants were like struggling like anything, and the peasants revolt started. Okay. And so many attempts were taken by the people to stop this Black Death and all. The doctors during that time were struggling for that, but they couldn't do beyond an extent. So the peasant revolt happened in 1831. You can see like the Black Death, it reached England in 1348. Okay, 1348. And for some years it continued, and finally at the peak of that in 1381 peasant revolt started, because this was an uprising of the peasants, because they were very much fed up because of this famine, because of this plague. They were really fed up, and they started reacting. The aftermath of Black Death and the result, the economic and political insecurities that they had. Actually, what exactly the immediate reason for this peasant revolt is like the King Richard II. Okay, King Richard II, who was the king of that time, he was just 14 years old during that time, 1-4, okay, 14 years old during that time. And this Richard II, he attempted to collect a poll tax. He imposed a tax on the people. Already they are struggling with this plague and this famine and all those things. They can't even eat properly 3 times in a day. And this king is imposing a tax. So they started reacting, and the violence throughout the country, the present so to the end of unpaid serfdom, they stopped it. Okay, the peasants reacted, and the king had to stop it. And so many people were there. Wat Tyler and John Ball were the 2 persons who led this struggle, and they got beheaded, of course. So all these things. And of course, what the other things I told is like the Wars of Roses, fall of Constantinople, and the printing press of William Caxton. Okay, yeah, all these are the 3 other major things happen. Fall of Constantinople, now you know. What is that? The Byzantium Empire is like attacked by the Ottoman Turkish Ottoman people, and they are attacking Byzantium Empire, and all the people, all the monks from that place are spreading all across the Europe with their books and all. So the literature, the classical periods, all those essentials are getting spread over to other places. Then again, printing press, invention of printing was also very important. It's just 1 minute more. So woodblock printing was invented. First, the printing was invented in China in the 3rd century AD. Okay, then the Koreans were the first people who invented this printing press with movable types. Okay, till then it cannot be moved, but with movable this thing, Koreans were the people who found it. And Gutenberg, Johannes Gutenberg was the person who introduced this movable printing press into English, okay, or into Europe, okay, introduced to Europe by a German. He was a German person, and he introduced this. And later, William Caxton in 1415 to 92, he lived. And William Caxton is the English merchant, diplomat, and a translator. He introduced printing press at Westminster in England in 1476. Gutenberg introduced it in Europe, and William Caxton introduced or established this in England. And with that, okay, so many books got printed, and people started to get an idea of